Back here on the show to jump right away into the second segment. The Falcons and the Denver Broncos, mostly the Falcons, shocking everyone with their pick of Michael Penix, bringing in another quarterback after they signed Kirk Cousins to that massive 4-year, $180 million deal. $100 million guaranteed already to Kirk Cousins. People just asking why would this be a selection that the Falcons would make? Well, in all honesty, it just seemed like Raheem Morris really was fond of Michael Penix. Same with their general manager Terry Fontenot. Bringing in Michael Penix, they had a lot of scouting there at his pro days and had a lot of extensive meetings with him. They explained a little bit into why they decided to go into this pick. More so, Raheem Morris saying, these guys go off the board pretty quickly, and we thought it would be important for us to address our future quarterback right now while we're picking this early. We don't want to be back in this position again. Then general manager Terry Fontenot added that they won't be in this position, very adamant and confident that they're not trying to be back in this position. He thinks they won't be back in this position, drafting early for a quarterback to lead them, lead their offense and lead their organization. From that point, it makes sense. But then you get into the problems, the friction that you might encounter with Kirk Cousins and his agent. His agent, Mike McCartney, gave an official statement to NFL media afterwards in which he said, yes, it was a big surprise. We had no idea this was coming. The truth is the whole league had no idea this was coming. We got no heads up. Kirk got a call from the Falcons when they were on the clock. That was the first we heard. It never came up in any conversation. And that just seems to be the root, the mainstay of all this, of all these issues that could come with Michael Penix being selected. My issues, confusion around this whole scenario of the draft and really having a good draft, having a good pick, really to me boils down to you have a lot of questions going into the draft, maybe a lot of positions you have to address. And for me, a good pick is, or a good draft overall would be addressing a lot of these positions and then leaving the NFL draft with more answers and more of a positive feeling than questions. This pick by the Falcons really doesn't give any answers to any of the main problems that they have and really left more people with a lot more questions after they selected Michael Penix than answers, than clarity of what this Falcons team could be going forward. And that's really the main issue I have. Just a lot more questions coming towards the Falcons, towards Michael Penix. And then I want to state that Michael Penix is a great player. I think he's a great player. He had a great season at Washington. I watched a lot of their games. But with this, with the media attention that you've garnered with this whole situation, it all starts with Michael Penix. Personally, I feel a little upset that he doesn't really get a chance to jump in right away to make his team or the team that selected him his own. Right away, it looks like he's going to be the backup, and with Kirk Cousins being there at least for 2 to 3 years, are you willing to wait that long to start Michael Penix? He is 24 years old already, and say it's only 2 years, 26 years old without not really getting any real first-team reps. If Kirk Cousins plays good, why else would you pay him that much money if you don't think he's going to be a great quarterback? Coming off of an Achilles injury is one thing. Understandable. With Kirk, you don't really know how that's going to work. But addressing that with a quarterback that has been the most injured out of all the other quarterbacks doesn't really make too much sense to me there. And with Michael Penix taking over or being drafted to the Falcons as well, you're just going to get all the extra stuff from the media, probably constantly asking these two, asking Kirk Cousins, just bringing up any chance that they get, how their relationship is going, how they're probably going to ask Kirk Cousins if he feels entitled to train or mentor Michael Penix to some extent. And whatever response he gets is going to create headlines. If he gives a wrong response, it's going to create more awkward tension there when I don't think it was absolutely necessary to bring in Michael Penix in there. And I know Raheem Morris, I read the quote that said that they don't want to be back in this position drafting a quarterback this high. The quarterback is of obvious importance to any team. regardless of who they have in there, the quarterback is the most important position. But saying that you don't want to be back there picking that early for a quarterback, you don't know when you're going to get the opportunity to do that again, so let's go take one right now. You could argue, or I would argue, that defense is, especially edge rusher, with having a prominent, very reliable edge rusher, a top-tier quarterback hunter. I would argue it's just as important to have one of those. Definitely a little bit less than a quarterback, but it's probably 2 or 3 on the hierarchy positioning of vital players that you have to have. And if you feel like you don't want to be back here picking a top 10 talent at quarterback, why wouldn't you want to not be in this position again to draft a top edge rusher, top talent edge rusher for your defense? When are you going to get another chance realistically, if you want to be so good, to have a chance to draft a top 10 edge rusher like Dallas Turner or anybody that you had as your best defensive player? When are you going to ever get another chance to be drafting in the top 10, top 8, if you want to be as great as you want to be? That, again, wasn't really cleared up to me with Michael Penix and how that would all work out. And overall, I have more questions. I'm sure I'm going to have more questions going forward, but this could all work out great, or not great, but good in some ways for the Falcons, because with Kirk Cousins, if it doesn't work out great, say he's really bad, he's not the same with the Achilles injury, you have a good replacement to bring in, and then instead of Kirk Cousins being not as good and you not having any other options to fall on because you traded away Desmond Ridder, now you have a good backup to come in, and if he balls out, he wins the job, that's great, and you're just going to have to swallow paying Kirk Cousins all that money, but in the end, winning games and having the best quarterback out there is what matters. So that's really the overall positive thing. I don't want to paint this out to be a negative thing, because Michael Penix is a great talent. I'm a big fan of him. It's just confusing because some people will just say he fell to the wrong team. And just going on the rest of the offseason and into the season, we're going to see how it all pans out, if there's any tension or friction there. But for right now, I'm sure people will give it a lot of bad reviews. I'm trying to look on the positive side of this, but certainly I as well have questions around this move for the Falcons. And then moving on to the Broncos real quick here. Bo Nix at number 12. It seemed inevitable that the Broncos were going to end up drafting Bo Nix. They seem to be the most in contact, the most fond of each other with the Broncos and Bo Nix, especially where they were picking. Nobody thought realistically the Broncos would trade up that high. But at 12, even though it all pointed to that direction, I just thought 12 was too early for a team that I thought needed a lot more help elsewhere. And to get Bo Nix, the instant thought I had was exactly that. You could get him later potentially, maybe later in the first round if you didn't want to take your chances the rest of the first round and wait until the second round to get him. That's understandable. 12 just seemed too early for me. And Sean Payton, over and over, the Broncos afterwards have said that, Bo Nix was their guy. It was evident from the start. And specifically, Sean Payton said on this whole process of selecting Bo Nix, he said, "We considered moving back, but once Penix went, it got a little stressful there at the end. We just didn't want to overthink this. This is our guy. We were going to take our guy. We would have been sick if we lost him for a couple of fifth-round picks." It's funny that he says that because, he's been there. He's been in that situation where they wait. He thinks he could get him in a few picks. We're just going to sit and not do anything crazy here, trade up or over reach here and take him too early. He's been on the opposite end of that spectrum, because if you think back to 2017, when Sean Payton was with the New Orleans Saints, needing a quarterback back in 2017, they had the 11th overall pick. And to give more context, in 2017, if some of you don't remember, up until pick number 9, or through pick number 9, Mitchell Trubisky was the only quarterback taken at number 2. And then you still had Patrick Mahomes in there as well as other options. It was widely rumored and reported that Sean Payton was a big fan of Patrick Mahomes. Now, years later, I'm sure everyone will say that he was certainly going to draft him because, he saw him being this great quarterback. I don't really buy that, but regardless, he was a big fan of Patrick Mahomes for whatever reason at that moment. And Mitchell Trubisky was the only quarterback taken up to that point. Then it came to pick number 10 for the Buffalo Bills. Not likely to draft a quarterback back then. It was the last pick right before Sean Payton wouldn't have had to do anything to draft Patrick Mahomes. He could have taken him, and he really, really liked him. But then the Chiefs shock everyone and move up to the 10th overall pick and trade 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, to move and swap picks with the Buffalo Bills, all the way from pick 27 to number 10 to jump in front of Sean Payton and take his guy. Patrick Mahomes goes on to be arguably the best quarterback already of all time, definitely in that conversation. And to make matters worse, playing in the same division as Sean Payton, just reminding him over and over again of what could happen if you don't overreach potentially or get the guy that you really want at your pick, regardless if it's too early, too late, or perfect in some people's minds. Saying that, it all kind of explains why his reasoning was there to draft Bo Nix at number 12. But at the same time, I just have to ask myself, when the Chiefs were selecting Patrick Mahomes, and you go back and tune in and everything, you don't want to mess up that opportunity. Of course, it could have worked out differently with Patrick. You know, you always think back, what could have been, what could have been, what could have been. But I just think it's very different in these two situations, and I'll wrap up this segment with this. Mahomes walked into, thankfully for him and his career, I'm sure, walked into a great situation with Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, learning under Alex Smith already, a very seasoned, very successful veteran. To walk into that situation, that played almost as much as his own talent and his trajectory did in being the kind of quarterback that he is now, walking into a fantastic situation there in Kansas City. To compare it now to Bo Nix and try to use that same logic there of trying to not miss out on your top guy, Bo Nix might start right away for the Denver Broncos. He doesn't have that veteran there to kind of learn off of. The weapons around him aren't great compared to what the Chiefs had as well. And he's already 24 years old. You know, there could be a ceiling there on how much better he can be compared to what you saw at Oregon and at the college level. So there are questions there. And you already have 3 other quarterbacks on your roster to compete for this job, to try and get you in the best situation that you can with your organization. There are some subtle differences there. I don't think Sean Payton referencing back to that time there to the Chiefs and missing out on Patrick Mahomes really fits too much here, but you know, he has that feeling. Of course, you're going to be reminded of it every day when you're playing Patrick Mahomes and stuff like that. I just think it is hard to ignore it and move past it, but in this situation, I don't think it lines up too much, and I'm definitely asking more questions, like the Falcons, from me about this pick. When are you going to address the other positions that you need? You don't have too many picks left in the draft overall. So, you know, they've decided to go with this. A quarterback is important, of course, the most important position, but still I am left with a bit more puzzled view on this than I would be satisfied if they traded back and still had the opportunity to get Bo Nix. But regardless of that, that's in the past now. The start of the second round is currently underway now. So stick around till the time after this break. I'm going to come back and have live reactions to the second round of the NFL draft for the rest of this show. So don't go anywhere. A lot more content and a lot more surprises, hopefully, in this second round right after this break.